Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
When your baby is born, to begin with, let's face it, there's a lot of feeding, changing, hopefully some sleeping, albeit at the wrong time of day, and there you go on repeat. This week, I'm joined by Jen Fuller, founder of Etta Loves and mum of 2. Jen is passionate about supporting babies to achieve the best possible visual experience to contribute to their development.
I was completely and utterly overwhelmed and we weren't getting on well with feeding. And there was a moment we had where I was sat, it was the depths of February, very, very cold. And I had all the apps, I had everything trying to tell me how to get better at breastfeeding because I was really determined to give it a good go. And it wasn't really working.
They're so reliant on us. But actually, when we look at their development, their visual development, their brain development, their gut development, like everything that's going on, they're doing so much. It's absolutely insane.
From a visual pattern point of view, it aids their visual perception, it aids their attention skills. And all of those things are things that babies are just constantly learning and absorbing the world around them through patterns.
I'm Pip and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth and beyond. When your baby is born, to begin with, let's face it, there's a lot of feeding, changing, hopefully some sleeping, albeit at the wrong time of day, and there you go on repeat. But one of the things babies are working on developing is their vision. And science behind visual development has evolved and allowed us parents to also open our eyes to the potential ways we can support our little people. And this week, I'm joined by Jen Fuller, founder of Etta Loves and mum of 2. Jen is passionate about supporting babies to achieve the best possible visual experience to contribute to their development while supporting parents and carers with easy, everyday moments. So welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm so excited because we've connected virtually and met very briefly in person, and I adore your products and brand and everything you stand for. So I'm so pleased that I finally get to chat to you in, a bit more depth.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's so lovely to nearly meet. This is the closest for now.
I feel like since 2020 and COVID, on Zoom and online recordings has just become the new way of meeting people, hasn't it? It's such a strange world that we've suddenly.
It is, and it is a real shame, but I still get really excited when I go back out and meet actual people in real life. It still feels like a bit of a novelty. So yeah.
Totally. Now, one of the things that I've always wanted to ask you, Jen, and I'm really fascinated about is I feel like baby vision is kind of niche, really. So what led you to become so personally passionate about visual and sensory development for babies?
Yes, it was very much an unintentional thing. And it was when my daughter Etta, who, surprise, surprise, is obviously the name, the inspiration for the brand, she was around, I always say 4 weeks, sometimes I say 6 weeks. We were in the trenches, let's put it that way. My husband had gone back to work. I was sat feeding. She was my first child. I was completely and utterly overwhelmed and we weren't getting on well with feeding. And there was a moment we had where I was sat, it was the depths of February, very, very cold, sat in my living room wearing a black and white jumper, not dissimilar to this one, but it had more shapes on it, feeding her. And I had all the apps, I had everything trying to tell me how to get better at breastfeeding because I was really determined to give it a good go. And it wasn't really working. But this one particular feed, she was chilled and she fed and she wasn't trying to get away from me and distracted and looking around and getting fussy. And I looked down and her beautiful big blue eyes were completely and utterly locked on to a part of this jumper. And I'd learned various bits and bobs through NCT and through a little bit of Google research on, what can my baby see? What on earth is going to be, what is this little person going to be like? So I knew that black and white was interesting to them, but that was sort of the depth of my knowledge. But when I saw this immediate response, and obviously it kind of was twofold. Firstly, she was fascinated and distracted, so she fed better. But secondly, as a mother, as an overwhelmed, exhausted mother that was kind of really, really nervous about things, I relaxed and I felt my shoulders kind of momentarily drop and I went, okay, we're going to get through this. But it gave me this idea, because I looked around and I had muslins everywhere. The muslin is kind of the, the absolute essential for every room, every changing bag, in the car, you name it, there's a muslin for the just in case. And I had all these muslins everywhere, which were perfectly decent at being a muslin, but that's all they did. And I thought it'd be so much easier to do whatever this jumper's doing, which at that point I didn't understand, and have that on something that I can put in her eyeline day in, day out. So that was the spark of the moment. So it came from no scientific background, no infant development background. I had a completely different background, but I was so fascinated by this sort of instantaneous sort of response for both of us that it set me on this path to go, right, what is in this and how do I make this something everyone can access?
I love that proper passion project. And I think often, small brands that can really then connect with parents, because you see yourself, mirrored in their own journey, which I absolutely love. And that totally comes across. I knew about your muslins with my first son, who's 3. Yeah. And this time, what I have absolutely adored, it saved us so many times, Jen, I can't tell you, is your YouTube video.
Oh, the animation. Oh, isn't it wonderful?
Amazing. So I have used that. We have been, and those guys that have been listening a while know that we've been on a massive journey with Alfie with allergies and reflux and meningitis and all sorts that has led us to have quite an uncomfortable, unsettled baby at times. It just is mesmerized by it. It just instantly calms him. It is insane. So I have spent many times saying, oh, thank goodness for this.
Yeah, and in a way, I mean, I sort of, when I put the idea to the team and our baby lab partners at the University of Sussex, who we work with to get even more science into the prints, because it's not just black and white. And I think that was the thing. We always develop products based on moments that we can make easier and better and more stimulating. But actually, for me, also having been drawn to the YouTube crazy animations for both of my children, because nothing else existed, I was driven by, again, the same desire to do something better, to do something more scientific. Because, yes, they follow principles of black and white and moving stuff, but they're a little bit wild. And I had a hypothesis that, babies are going to stare at them, but are these not a bit overstimulating? Could this be done better? So that's why we developed it. It cost a ton of money. It makes us nothing. Because obviously it's just sat on YouTube, but I'm really, it's just another part, I guess, and it's an extension of that passion, because I know how hard it is, and I know that some parents will want or need a sort of visual distraction that is a screen, but they're going to want that to be the best it can be. So that's kind of how it came back. But I love it too. I find it also, it's really important. It's relaxing and really nice for the parents to watch. It's very much, there's a section there for breathing. Again, it's not this frenetic earworm, crazy dancing things. It's very much like, right, take a moment, both of you, have a time out.
My brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book. This is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve. You've honestly nailed it. But because like you say, so many of those things, and I'm sure we're thinking of the same crazy ones.
Probably. Exactly. They're absolutely, they've got me through many moments. Don't get me wrong.
But equally, the music is irritating for a parent, isn't it? Like you listen to it once, and then by the 6th time, you're like,
Yeah.
Whereas, that's not the case. So yeah, you've absolutely nailed it. Now,
Yeah.
I know that the science for you is
Mm.
really important. And like you say, you're not just about having stuff that's black and white, but actually it's very much about the science of supporting babies. So what actually can babies see from birth, and kind of how quickly does that change? Because I know that having, looked at some of the work that you've put out there, it's not actually what people think necessarily.
No, exactly that. So there's quite a lot of myths that are out there around baby vision. But I mean, broadly speaking, there's no such thing. We work with averages when we do our scales and colours and all sorts and do our research. But obviously, there's no such thing as an average when it comes to babies. Babies are wonderfully, beautifully unique. But broadly speaking, when babies are born, their eyes are sort of anatomically fully developed. They develop in the womb. But what they haven't done is they haven't learnt to see, because that comes with the experience of being out in the world and using those eyes. Because obviously, learning to see is all about sort of the eye to brain connection and the interpretation of the images. So initially, what you've got is quite a few things going on. Number one, it's very, very blurry, very blurry. There has been some research, and it's nearly been debunked, to say that babies actually see things upside down. But no one quite knows. But the research certainly suggests that's probably not true. But for decades, people thought babies saw everything upside down, just because the way that their eyes were not developed yet. Very blurry, very poor colour vision. Again, there's a myth that says babies only see in black and white from birth. It's not actually true. Babies can detect a very strong, highly saturated red. But I think the thing is, on top of that, it doesn't look like red. It doesn't look like this scrunchie I have down here. It will look like a very, very pale, sort of grey red, from what we can tell from the research that's out there. So that's one of the myths. But it's the high contrast offers sort of is going to register most clearly on their retina. Colours don't come into view until actually quite quickly. So it goes from sort of red to green to blue to yellow and all of the paler colours. So actually it does develop incredibly quickly, to that part of your question. Sort of by 12 months, babies, their vision isn't far off on adults, but actually full colour vision doesn't develop until we're about 13 years old, technically.
Wow.
Technically, it's a very long journey, but there's such rapid development in the first 12 months, and you'll see that you'll have seen that with your children, and people listening, if they've got little ones, will see there's such a change almost from week to week, and what you'll see they're finding more interesting, and therefore probably what they're able to see more and more. But effectively, yeah, they're going to be more drawn to things that are close up, so they can see sort of 20 to 30 centimeters, so an average ruler away, and very high contrast. But that does change quickly, and it's not until around 4 or 5 months that they get 3D vision, or kind of a depth perception. So again, it lines up with a lot of the moments, and you'll they start pulling your hair. I've had a bob ever since Etta hit 5 months old, because they grab with accuracy, and it really hurts because they're incredibly crazy strong, these babies. But that's because they're able to more often hit things, get things correctly, because they've all of a sudden, their eyes are being held straight by the muscles that are holding them straight, and they can actually then get depth perception. So it's utterly fascinating. And you may have seen on quite a few of our platforms, the thing that really resonates with customers and just any parents is where we show the baby blur videos, and we show, how does a baby see this thing? This looks like this to us. And actually you see that progression month by month. And people are amazed at how poor that vision is to start with, but how quickly it changes. Yeah. So yeah.
I always feel like when we see especially like a newborn baby, we almost feel like they're not really doing anything, don't we? Because they're so reliant on us for every aspect of their survival. But actually, when we look at their development, their visual development, their brain development, their gut development, like everything that's going on, they're doing so much. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely. I feel like we always underestimate babies, don't we, in that aspect?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's amazing how quickly they can see complex patterns and can see a range of different colours. So, and it's fascinating. And it's something I always find really interesting is that, we as parents and humans, we almost know to exaggerate our features. So when you get near a baby, you're naturally kind of opening your eyes wide, because you want, and obviously that's because we need to be seen. It's that notion. So I find that fascinating, that we've all adapted because we sort of understand that we want those facial features to be really visible to our baby.
So true, isn't it? And actually for mothers, even without that underpinning science, actually sometimes that's really instinctive.
Yeah,
You know, that
absolutely.
once you beat your baby, you will naturally open your eyes or
Yeah,
exaggerate. It's so interesting. Now, one of the
exactly.
things you've talked about there a little bit, Jen, and I wanted to just delve into a bit more is
Yeah,
patterns,
yeah,
because I know that's another thing that you're really kind of keen on within Etta Loves, is supporting those kind of muscles and that visual development, not just through advancing colours, but also actually patterns. So talk to us about
yeah.
what that looks like for babies. A quick pause here because I want to share a super important health tip from Nutricia, the sponsor of this week's episode. The first 1,000 days of your child's life, which is the 9 months of pregnancy and up to their second birthday, provide an incredible opportunity to support their gut health, which has a profound impact on all sorts of short and long-term health outcomes. Which means, as a pregnant or new mum listener, you are in an incredible time of opportunity. So here is a top tip. Steer away from added and free sugars. There are studies suggesting an association between sugar consumption in the early years and a negative influence on the baby's gut microbiome. Opting for natural foods and ingredients with low or no added sugars for children is likely to be a healthier option. For example, some fresh fruit sticks over a sweetened squash. Gut health matters for so many physical, developmental, and psychological health outcomes for our children. So here is to us helping them on their way to healthier, happier futures.
So patterns are ultimately, they're more kind of neurally stimulating. So they're going to create greater and stronger brain connections between the eye and the brain than looking at a plain surface, which makes sense. And I think patterns are fascinating in many ways. So from a visual pattern point of view, it aids their visual perception, it aids their attention skills. And if you think about it, the world is full of patterns. Even if we think of our face, there's a pattern to our face, and then there's a pattern when someone, recognizing the pattern of what happy looks like versus what's sad or angry. And all of those things are things that babies are just constantly learning and absorbing the world around them through patterns. They can start to predict sequences through patterns. And obviously sort of the understanding of patterns, it leads on further down the line to sort of languages and maths, and everything is patterned. So actually from a visual point of view, it's so important that they see patterns everywhere. And they will see. I mean, nature is full of self-repeating patterns. A lot of the world around us we don't even notice, probably a lot of our interiors. So there's so much that's just going to be around you for you to show and interact with your baby. But yeah, it's hugely important because they really sort of start to support that learning and that visual experience in the best possible way for little ones.
One of the things that we've really loved is, I mean, there's not been much of it this week, but when you get that lovely sun that shines through leaves of a tree, and that kind of pattern, especially when you've got a baby that's in a pram, they're looking kind of upwards, aren't
Absolutely.
they? That's been an absolute favourite of Alfie's, although at the moment he's also very much exploring faces and he wants to grab everybody's face. And you forget, don't you, how razor sharp those little fingernails are. My goodness, I feel like I'm just full of scratches at the moment.
Yeah, and they get the fish hook grip in your mouth and you're like, oh, darling.
Isn't that just lovely?
Yeah.
Isn't that just lovely? But I guess what's then really interesting is that we recognise now that babies have got a they can't see very far, so we want to have things quite close to them, but with more advanced patterns. So it kind of makes exact sense why you, in that initial brainwave moment with Etta, were like, well, a Muslim makes great sense because every mum with a baby has got one permanently over their shoulder, haven't they?
Absolutely.
So you've almost got that easy access, even when you're, washing up a bottle or doing whatever you might be doing, multitasking with the baby, is actually they then got that visual element, which we know when babies are, intrigued or mesmerized by something, they're generally a little bit happier, which is good news.
Yeah, they're not very good at multitasking. So if they're looking and staring, they find it quite hard to scream and be angry. They still can do it, but, they're more likely not to.
Definitely. So I guess that's one of the ways that I always think of bringing in, that kind of sensory product into everyday life, because I think what's important is that we don't ever, and I know this is important to you as well, Jen, we don't ever want to overwhelm parents or feel like we're burdening them with another thing to do, because motherhood, postpartum, the fourth trimester is blooming hard, and we don't need to be adding to it. But what can parents do proactively to support baby's visual development without it becoming this massive extra hurdle to jump through?
Another tick list. I think there's lots of things. I think one of them is get outside, like you said. I think the more visual experience, the better. That can come from anywhere. So if you're out, and like I said, outside is wonderful. Putting the pram, the pram hood down. It's been a long day.
Like a lid.
Yeah, it's like a lid. The pram hood down if your baby's in the bassinet still, and parking up under a tree, whether that tree's got leaves or not. There's going to be movement. There's going to be, like you say, sort of the diffusion of light through, and it's going to be fascinating for them. Stopping next to, interesting shop windows if they're sat up, giving them a moment to just pause and take things in. I think there is stuff everywhere that to us we may not think, oh, that's interesting. To a baby, it's a whole new thing to look at. So almost getting out and slowing down. And I think that links to another thing I think is really important, is look at the cues that your baby gives you. Quite often I'll have people say, oh, all makes sense. My baby loves these curtains, or loves this cushion, or loves, like you said, the light, and actually the light casting shadows of the window, or vases, of whatever you've got in your house, when it sort of hits the wall in different ways. So take cues from your baby. Even if you want you need a super slow day, your house is going to be full of wonderful things that your baby's going to find interesting. And obviously you can then move it into things that are not just visually stimulating, but also have sound, have an element of kind of cause and effect as they get a little bit older, whether they have a salt shake. Obviously all these things, keep an eye on them and don't let them hit themselves in the head or eat it. But you know what I mean? There is so much around there that we might just overlook, and you might think you need a basket full of toys. You really don't. And I think that's why most of our range, I'd say actually probably 90% of our range, can do something else, or its primary function is something you need anyway. So I think this is the thing for me. And then, the other one is lean into the science. And I know that sounds a little bit of a burden, but what I mean by that is find some snippets, whether it's via us or anywhere, of what your baby can see at the month they're in. I mean, if you've got the Wonder Weeks book or app, or any of the work that obviously you do with your clients or is readily available, have a little look, if you get a quiet moment, of what can my baby see this month, just to help you have some ideas and be steered towards certain things, certain activities, and it will just make it a little bit less overwhelming and take some of the guesswork out. So they're probably my three, I think.
I love that as well, because I really remember with my first gen thinking right, okay, yes, he was nailing his feeding and doing whatever babies do sleep wise, and that kind of consumes your early weeks, doesn't it? And then we kind of got to this point and I was like, what else do I do with you? Like, how do I play with you this little? So actually, if you can find out actually what your baby can see, or understand a little bit of the kind of patterns that will be supporting their visual development, kind of just takes that guesswork out. Because I do remember that moment of sitting there like, I feel like I should be doing something else with you now, and I don't really know where to start.
The awake windows get longer, and obviously again every baby's totally different. Some kind of are born and seem immediately alert, others you don't really see what the colour of their eyes for a couple of months. So I think it's very much, don't obviously, and the good thing about babies, there's lots of good things in this sense, is they will tell you when they're done and when they're overstimulated. They will turn their head, they will turn away. So it's all about, with so much in the fourth trimester and beyond, it's all about just reading those cues and doing what they need. But I think it's just make it easy, and just take the pressure off yourself to be sort of perfect and heading off to sensory classes and these things that sometimes just become a bit too much. It doesn't need to be. Your baby will be getting a wonderful experience from just the world around them and your face and your singing and whatever pets or siblings or whoever comes around. They're just it's fascinating every day.
I love it. Poor Alfie woke up from his morning nap today in the middle of a toddler sensory class. They were all dressing up as ducks, singing, dancing, and of course his brother was delighted he'd woken up to join the party, so immediately started dressing him up as a duck. And I was like, oh mate, poor second child sensory experience.
Oh my gosh, it's a lot, isn't it?
Ultimate overwhelm instantaneously. He's embracing it though. He embraced it. It was all good.
I love that. That's why there's always so many children or so many babies just sobbing or just howling at baby sensory. It just gets too much, but they can't actually get away from it.
Yeah,
they can't just turn their heads. It's just
with swimming lessons and things, isn't it? We forget that actually that is sensory on their skin, and sometimes like 10 minutes is just more than enough.
More than enough, exactly.
A bit like being in front of some of those not so appealing YouTube things. 10 minutes for me is more than enough.
I'm like,
I may
great.
feel the same. So tell me about what makes Etta Loves different, Jen, because we know there's so much out there, isn't there? You know, baby black and white stuff.
Yeah.
But what makes you different to that kind of the other things out there, or, you know, like we mentioned, some of the other YouTube videos
The
that
other
parents might
things.
find.
I think the key thing is we put the science of sight at the core of everything we do and everything we design. And I don't really think anyone does that. I think there are people that claim that because the science is available, but just knowing that babies see black and white for me is not enough. You know, if we want something to be genuinely efficacious, I want it to support parents and support babies. So I think that's the key thing. You know, we invest in our orthoptist, who we've been with since the very beginning. I found we have a PhD student at the University of Sussex, so we're doing new research to go, right, we think we don't know enough about this, you know, what exists in the research? Well, actually nothing. Well, why don't, you know, can you prepare a study that gives us a bit more information? Which means that we can test also all of our designs in their baby lab, we can optimize them, and no one does that. And I think it's just because, for me, I've always kind of had that view that if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And, you know, you certainly, that first year of parenthood or motherhood for me was so hard, and so it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I wasn't expecting it. And if I can just help a handful of parents make those moments easier because the science is embedded in this thing that they're going to use and their baby's going to pretty much guaranteed love, then that makes it just so worthwhile. So that's the key thing, I think. I mean, I could go on about the quality and the, you know, yes, it's underpinned by all the good stuff, but that is the absolute key, that we design based on what moments we can make easier, and we use the science to feed fully into that. So yeah, that's the thing. That's
And
why
I think, you know, as a consumer on the other foot, I think you really feel that things just like, you know, your sensory cards that have a side for baby and a side for mum. And actually one of my friends who's recently had a baby, and we gave her some of those as a gift. And she said she cried that morning because the message that was just on the back of the sensory card that her baby was looking at just really resonated at that moment. And sometimes it's just that, like, me too, isn't it? Actually, you're not alone, and starting to create that
100%.
community feel that's so powerful postnatally.
100%. And it's so funny. We did a couple of trade shows before, when we were just about to launch our flashcards with affirmations. And every time we did one, there'd be at least one lady who'd come up, who was obviously, you know, a retailer, would come up and go, "What's these?" I'm like, "Oh, turn them over." And they'd burst into tears, and they'd be like, "This is what I needed." Because I think I've felt Etta's now 9 next week, and Uma, her little sister, is 6, but I can tap into almost immediately that emotion I felt in that first however long. And I think it's so important to have these little lifts. But I think, again, no one's ever done a flashcard with an affirmation, and we'll always do things better than what's out there, you know, just in a different way, because I think we just deserve the best for our baby, but also the best for us as mothers. We're going through one hell of a time and it's, you know, the hardest job in the world, and it's just to try and make it just that little bit easier. That's kind of, really drives me, I must say. So yeah.
And you can totally tell, Jen, your passion completely shines through, which excites me, because it's, like you say, it's hard enough, so let's try and make it a bit easier. We are all for that. Jen, if you can, and this is always really difficult when you are as passionate about this topic as you are, but could you try and share 3 top tips for us with new or expectant parents listening?
I would say, remember, you are learning every single day, and your baby is learning. I think that's such a key thing, to just, it kind of wraps up in be kind to yourself. And I know that can be, you know, sounds like it could be on a mug, but I actually think it's really important that there is no manual. Just be kind, deep breathing, get outside, and just be kind. You are learning just as your baby is learning as well. And I think that's such a top tip for me. Other ones are, say yes to all the help. I think everyone says that it takes a village, but obviously some people don't have that village as readily available. So I think very much, you know, absolutely say yes to help. Even it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean you're bad anything. It means you're good, because you're accepting that this is hard and you need help and you need that support. And just don't buy all the stuff. Buy the stuff you need. Buy the stuff, you know, that's recommended. Don't feel like you need all the stuff. Your baby needs you, They need love, they need food, they need some level of stimulation. That is it. You do not need all the stuff. And if you keep coming back to that, because I was that parent that would go along to, I had a wonderfully supportive NCT group, but we'd go along and when we'd all have our babies and someone would have something that I didn't have. And I was like, what's that? And they're like, oh, little whoever really likes this. And I'd think, oh my God, maybe I need that for Etta. God, I had so much stuff and I didn't need that stuff. And I guess that's kind of what spurred us to do things that were kind of multifunctional, but don't feel pressured into buying all the stuff. Just, you are everything they need. So, yeah.
Definitely. Oh, Jen, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for your time and sharing that information, because I think, it's really supportive and nurturing and helpful for parents to have that kind of underpinning. And for anyone listening who thinks, actually, I want to hear more about the kind of Etta Loves research and science backing or explore some of their products, do head to the episode description where you will find Etta Loves linked. Jen, thank you so much. I know it's a massive passion project, but we are so grateful for you kind of lifting the lid and making this important, because it really is.
Thank you for having me.
If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.